For each team in the Premier League, I'm going to pick out one signing that would drastically improve their performance for next season. Starting off with Arsenal. Now, after finishing second in the previous 2 seasons, they really need that marquee signing to strengthen and just push them slightly ahead of Man City. Now, plenty of players they can go for, but one that I think would be great and also highly contested in the market right now, João Neves of Benfica, the 19-year-old wonder kid. I think this signing would really fit with Arteta's philosophy. Let's look at like their best signings, right? They come from people like Odegaard or Saliba, where they know they're buying talent, but they're not buying them at their peak. Every season that goes by, they seem to develop and get better as a footballer. This would be the same for João Neves. At the same time, he fits in a gap for them, which is a little bit weak. You know, last season they played Partey and Jorginho there, but I think he would be a slight upgrade and one that would drastically improve over time. Keeping in mind, you then allow Declan Rice to really push forward and be a real box-to-box midfielder rather than just a central defensive mid. And I think you can see for England, he performs much better when he has that free range to both get up and attack, as well as his usual great defensive work. Moving on to Aston Villa, we have a really interesting club in this summer transfer window because they've got rid of Douglas Luiz, one of their best players. And they've already spent more money bringing in Maatsen from Chelsea, or who was on loan at Borussia Dortmund. So they're really making that step up, and you can see why. Gaining automatic qualification to the Champions League for a club like Aston Villa is absolutely huge. The revenue it can bring in, already Adidas have a Champions League bonus, so for them, I'm gonna go out and splash the cash. Now, this is gonna be a bit of a polarizing pick, but this lad has top quality talent, but he's been dropped from his national team, and he's seeing a lack of minutes at his current domestic team. Keep in mind, he's also a fan of the club, but he left them. Jack Grealish. Now imagine that. It gets even more interesting when you consider the fact that Moussa Diaby has just left for Saudi. We know his talent's taken on players. I just think if you sold him for £100 million and you can buy him back at 60 million, and arguably he's a better player and developed under Pep, it could be a huge success for them, keep them in that top 4, or maybe Emery goes mad again and pushes them even higher. Moving on to Bournemouth, then we have a slightly difficult selection because ultimately they played really well as a team, finishing 12th. I think fans were overall happy with that, but everyone wants to see progression moving up. Their biggest issue for me last season was they conceded too many goals. They were mid-table in terms of their performance, but in terms of goals conceded, they were right in the relegation zone. For that reason, I don't think Neto is up to it in terms of his ability anymore. That's also proven by the manager who dropped Neto, the captain of the club, for homegrown talent Mark Travers towards the end of the season. And that is perfect for my suggestion, who is Liverpool's backup keeper, Kelleher. Now, he takes over the national team starting spot for Ireland, so he's already one step ahead of the potential starter for next season, or if you say he's replacing Neto, he's just about 10 years younger than him. And in my opinion, Kelleher is an absolutely outstanding keeper. We saw when Alisson was injured how good he could be. He probably won't come cheap, I'm thinking 15 to 20 million pound. But for the quality of player you're getting, for a player that probably wants starting minutes at his age and at his talent, I think it would be a genius signing by them. Brentford have already spent 30 million this transfer window on Igor Thiago, probably going to replace Ivan Toney. But where I'm going to make a suggestion then is actually at centre-back. Partially because it would improve their squad, but mainly just because of how talented this lad is. He's currently 23 years old and plays in Austria for Salzburg, so you know he's got talent. It's Pavlovic. I thought he had a fantastic Euros. He's only going to develop with age. He's wanted by clubs like AC Milan, so it's going to be difficult to secure him. But at the end of the day, with the money Brentford spend in the transfer window, surely they can bring in a big centre-half. We move on to one of the most difficult teams to predict for next season, Brighton. The reason for that, they've lost De Zerbi, he's gone to Marseille, they've taken St. Pauli's manager, who usually plays a 3-4-3 formation in the second Bundesliga with St. Pauli. But at the end of the day, this is the Premier League, he might need to adapt his strategies, we haven't seen any pre-seasons yet. So in terms of my transfer prediction or who I think they should sign, I'm going to go with who I'd like to see. Now, I would play a 4-2-3-1 for Brighton. I'd play João Pedro off the left wing, I'd play Enciso through the middle, and I'd play Simon Adingra off the right wing. And then up front, you even have Evan Ferguson, or my suggestion, because Ferguson wasn't really up to it last season, Callum Wilson of Newcastle. Now, the more you look at Newcastle, the more I think Alexander Isak should be guaranteed nail first choice starter. So for someone like Wilson, who has all that potential, or all that talent I should say, he shouldn't be sitting on the bench behind someone else. He is a guaranteed starter for most Premier League clubs. So therefore, I think Brighton should go and snap him up. On to Chelsea then, and arguably, you could just say their transfer goal is to sign no one else, because they have so many players, so much depth in so many different positions that they just don't need. So for me to suggest someone, it doesn't really help, but if you're a Chelsea fan watching this, you would probably feel shortchanged. So I am going to give you a huge transfer target, Euro wonder goalkeeper, Georgi Mamadashvili from Valencia. He is a fantastic prospect for the next 5-10 years of football. I think if you can strengthen up the goalkeeper position, you will of course need to sell one of your goalkeepers then, or maybe even both, out of Sanchez and Petrovic. But overall, if you did manage to pull that deal off, I think it would drastically pull Chelsea forward, because defensively, they are solid. So if you can get an amazing, outstanding shot stopper behind that, I think they could be a force again in the Premier League. Crystal Palace under Oliver Glasner were the most interesting team towards the end of last season. Now, we don't know if that's going to continue for one main reason. They lost their star man Elise to Bayern Munich. Now, in terms of replacing him, they have already kind of replaced him in the form of Daichi Kamada. Getting him in as a free transfer from Lazio was a fantastic piece of business. I really think he'll find his form again in the Premier League. But I'm actually going to strengthen that centre attacking mid position again, because Glasner likes to play a 4-3-2-1, and in that the 2-1 part, was of course Elise and Eze. But with Elise gone, potentially Eze to leave as well, regardless, you're going to need more depth there and more quality. So I'm going to bring in Matt O'Reilly from Celtic. He ripped apart the Scottish League, Celtic star man without a doubt. He'll be tough to let go from my club Celtic, but I really think he can kick on in the Premier League. He's perfect for Palace as one of those young players who can develop. Moving on to Everton then, who last season had the second worst goals scored in the league, only getting beat out by Sheffield United, who of course got relegated in last position. What that means is they need an attacking winger or striker or creative player to start making something happen up top for them. And I think I have the perfect player. He currently plays in the Championship, and Everton, not a club that typically goes and spends huge money. Now, they will have a decent amount of cash from Branthwaite, but at the end of the day, this player is almost certain to get a summer transfer move because he was Championship Player of the Season. Yes, Crescencio Somerville of Leeds. I think it'd be fantastic for Everton. You know, he's creative down the wings. He can take people on. He can cross the ball. Or most importantly, he can actually score goals for them. So I would love to see him at Everton. I think it'd be a huge hit. I predict Fulham might have a difficult season this year in the Premier League. They've lost two of their star players in Paulinho and Adebayo. My suggestion then will of course be to replace one of those positions. I think ultimately I'm going to go for centre-back. Now this should have been done as a swap deal, but with tossing Adebayo, probably butchering that name, going to Chelsea, where I have no idea why Chelsea have bought them. They definitely don't need any more centre-backs. But that overhaul of too many centre-backs is perfect to take advantage of for a club like Fulham. A short move down the road, so the player will hopefully like it. Trevor Chalobah of Chelsea. Now, he played a couple of minutes towards the end of the season. He's young enough where he can play and develop at Fulham. I genuinely think because of the congestion at Chelsea, you could probably get him for about £10 million. And for a player of his quality at his age, I think that'd be an outstanding bargain. A team like Fulham always looking to try and take advantage of bargains, so there's one. Ipswich make a surprise return to the Premier League, and for me, I don't see them spending huge amounts of money in the transfer window. We've already seen them go out and spend £18 million on Omari Hutchinson, who played for them last season on loan. I think ultimately they're not going to go out and spend huge amounts of money. It's probably not in their club's DNA, and they don't want that huge risk that if they go down next season, they sign these massive contracts for players, you put yourself in financial difficulty. So for me, I'm going to go for a budget option who could have huge upside. Of course, there's a reason for the budget selection. He's had lots of injury issues, a horrific leg break, and since then he hasn't really been the same. but at the same time, he never got that chance to really get back into the Everton squad. It's Andre Gomez. Now, bit of a surprise selection, but at the same time, he does really fit what they need. They need that Premier League experience. He's got 6 years under his belt at Everton, and I think he's got that potential upside. You know, he once sold for 25 million euros. He has got talent. I think after a couple injury concerns, this could be a good chance to kind of revitalise himself and improve Ipswich. Leicester in April announced financial difficulty. Now, getting promoted to the Premier League is seriously going to help them, but I don't think they'll be going out and spending huge amounts of money just because of the risk of points deductions, as well as what happened last time when they got relegated, and that's what caused the financial issues. So for me, I've picked out a £10 million deal that they could already hijack. Willy Kwambala is one of United's young up-and-coming prospects at 19 years old, but he looks to be sold to Villarreal for 10 million euros. Now, this seems like a perfect transfer where Leicester can swoop in and take advantage of that sort of deal. At the same time, they get a young player that they can develop, but even if things were to go wrong and they bounce back down to the Championship, because we've seen a lot of that in recent seasons between teams that get promoted, then therefore you get a chance at playing him and developing him and then selling him on later so it doesn't affect the financial difficulties. Watching Liverpool last season, I think there's one clear area where I think they could drastically improve. They knew that, they did try and bring someone in to fill that gap, but ultimately I don't think Endo was the correct option. He did work, he was good in the Premier League, but I just think you can go out and get a great central defensive midfielder to replace him. Or if Arne Slot plays his favoured formation of 4-2-3-1, then you can play both of these players. Ultimately, I think Youssouf Fofana, the central defensive midfielder of Monaco, would be a fantastic addition to the squad. He was outstanding for Monaco. This can be proven by the fact that the Champs brought him into the French squad. I really think he's a high-level central defensive midfielder, and there's not many better options out there, especially at his price tag. Man City obviously don't need to sign anyone. They are fantastic. But maybe they do, because they have some strong Saudi links for their key players in Ederson and De Bruyne. Now, recently, the Ederson links have been quieted down, but the De Bruyne links seem very heavy still. So let's imagine that De Bruyne goes. Well, they're going to need an instant replacement for him. Julian Alvarez played a little bit there. There was some other options if they want to play a bit more defensively. But if you want a straight swap for a central attacking midfielder, look to the Euros, look to the final, look to Spain, look to my player of the tournament, Dani Olmo of Leipzig. He is absolutely fantastic when he's fit. He is so underrated because of all his injury issues, but go out, play the release clause of 60 million euros, and you will have an absolute star in your squad. In terms of, yes, that potential injury risk, well, Man City, is there a better team to have injuries for? They have so much depth, they can change formation. I think Dani Olmo would be a perfect addition for Man City. My suggestion for Manchester United is both very easy and very difficult. It's very easy because there's a lot of areas for Man United you could improve, but it's very difficult because they're linked with absolutely everyone, and by the time you're watching this video, I don't know who they signed and who they haven't signed. They're linked with Branthwaite of Everton, Zerki of Bologna, Ugarte of PSG, and I don't know which one of those complete. My suggestion is a player they are still heavily linked with, Matthijs de Ligt of Bayern Munich. Now, de Ligt has been not nailed in that Bayern Munich team, so it could give United fans this big risk, and they'd rather take Branthwaite, who of course was nailed for Everton and has league experience. But let's not forget, he's only 24 years old, and that Bayern Munich has been a bit of a poised chalice. They just don't really know what's going on. Look at Kim Min-jae, who was fantastic for Napoli, won the league with them, moved to Bayern, and it just all looked horrific. So I wouldn't be put off by de Ligt and his, not fantastic form coming into a potential United transfer, but at the same time, I just think he would work fantastically in that system. Even if they take all three, you can play Martinez, Branthwaite and de Ligt there. Plus, Ten Hag absolutely adores signing players that have played for Ajax, so it's perfect for the club as well. I think an amazing signing for Newcastle would be Sandro Tonali from Bet365. If they get him playing into this system, it would work really, really well. Sorry for the horrible joke there. But ultimately, I do think Tonali will be fantastic this season if he's allowed to play anytime soon. But my suggestion for who they actually should bring in would be their weakness from particularly the end or the tail end of last season, that right wing spot. Now, they went out and spent a huge amount of money on Harvey Barnes, but he plays left wing, the same as Anthony Gordon. So either Gordon's going to leave and he's going to take that spot, or we need someone at right wing. Now, there's a potential huge transfers you can bring in, but with Newcastle's questionable financial situation in terms of profit and sustainability and the Premier League rules around that, I think we shouldn't go mad with the suggestion, and we're going to go for a potential smart buy from Chelsea with obviously their congested squad. That would be Madueke from Chelsea, who signed for 35 million euros, but is well down in Chelsea's pecking order behind Cole Palmer and about 5 other players. So potentially you could get him on loan, or maybe a cheap deal to buy him if Chelsea want rid of him. Also played with Anthony Gordon in the English youth setup, so if they do keep hold of him, that could be a nice little bond there. And overall, I think he's just a decent player. Due to profit and sustainability regulations in the Premier League, it looks like Nottingham Forest could be forced to sell some of their star players. Last season's standout player was probably Murillo or Gibbs-White, so I'm going to focus on replacing Murillo as I think he's most likely to leave. In terms of a centre-back then, it's going to be tough to replace him on a budget. But ultimately, I think there's a decent Colombian that's played almost every game in the Copa America. Obviously, they've just got to the final of it. He plays in Belgium for Genk. I think you can easily get him for less than £10 million, which, given the current financial situation of Forest, I think it's fair. It's Carlos Cuesta. It's going to be tough for Southampton to stay in the league, and it gets even harder when star players like Walker Peters look to be leaving. They've just signed Sugawara from AZ Alkmaar. My suggestion is going to be on the left side, Maxime de Kuipers at 23 years old, playing for Club Bruges, whilst also being in the Belgium setup. He's seriously got potential where I think he can grow into a serious footballer and maybe make a profit on him, which would be great for Southampton. Overall, I think Tottenham are a really well-balanced team going into the new season. But there's still one area of improvement that I think you can focus on. It's of course replacing Harry Kane. Now, I know towards the end of the season, Richarlison hit a lot of form, but over an entire season, you need someone you can rely on, or at least have a second option coming off the bench that will give you something a little bit different. Now, someone like Ollie Watkins would be perfect, but I don't think he's ever going to leave Aston Villa for Tottenham. And then ultimately, who they're heavily linked with, I do think is a good signing for them in the form of Ivan Toney. He's made it very clear he wants to leave Brentford, so that seems like the perfect option, which will allow Toney to go up front and Son to slot into where I think he performs better on that left wing. Looking next at West Ham, I think they seriously need to improve their defence. And they agree with me because they've already gone out and improved it with Max Kilman from Wolves for £40 million. Now, I don't think West Ham will go out and get another £40 million defender, so I'm going to tone it down a bit with a bit more of a budget option in the form of Jake O'Brien. The Irish international centre-back was a bit of a surprise package at Lyon last season, helping them turn around their awful start to the season. Overall, at 6'6" and Kilman being 6'4", they could be a perfect partnership in terms of aerial threats going forward and defensively, of course, especially going forward because they'll have James Ward-Prowse trying to hit their head. I think it's a great budget sort of option for West Ham to bolster their defence. Finally then, we have Wolves, and they have a 6'4", £40 million hole in defence that needs filling, and my idea comes from Leipzig. El Chadlia Bichuabi, whose name I've probably just absolutely butchered, joined Leipzig last summer but didn't start a single game from them. This kid came from PSG, he's only 19 years old currently, and I think he's got huge potential. At 6'5", he's going to be a huge aerial threat of what they've just lost in Max Kilman. Leipzig bought him for €15 million last summer, and because of signing Luke Haber, they really aren't able to play him. Given the fact that Luke Haber's only 21 and Willy Orban, who's about 28 or 29, is club captain, I don't see him getting any game time, so maybe you can get a discount on that 15 million. I think it'll be a great buy. This video took a long time to prepare, so if you did like it, please like, subscribe, check out some of the other videos. All the best to you. Cheers.